I still remember the morning when the sun felt a little too bright, as if it knew something in my life was about to change forever. My son's wedding day, the day I had prayed for, dreamed of, and secretly feared all at once. He looked so handsome standing there in his cream colored sherwani, his smile stretching wide as his bride walked toward him. My heart swelled with pride, but beneath that joy was a soft ache I couldn't name then. He used to hold my hand whenever he was nervous, even as a grown man, but that day, he didn't reach for me. He was holding someone else's hand. And I knew, deep down, that the world I had lived in, a world where my son's laughter filled our home, where I was the first person he called when something went wrong, was slowly dissolving before my eyes. I told myself this was how it was meant to be. A mother raises her son only to watch him walk into someone else's life, to build his own family. Still, when the ceremony ended and everyone clapped and cheered, I stood there, smiling like every proud mother does, pretending that the sting in my chest was happiness and not the feeling of being quietly left behind. The first few weeks after the wedding were a blur of phone calls and messages. He would call me every evening, sometimes even twice a day, just to check in. "Mom, how are you? Did you eat?" Those words were music to my ears. I would tell him small things, how the garden had bloomed again, how the cat had kittens, how his father missed him, but wouldn't say it out loud. We would laugh. It felt as if nothing had changed at all. But slowly the calls became shorter, then less frequent. "Sorry, Mom, we had guests." "Mom, I'll call tomorrow. She's not feeling well." "Mom, work's been crazy." I told myself it was fine. He was newly married. He needed time to settle, to adjust. Every mother says this to herself when she starts to notice her son's voice fading away from her daily life. One evening, I dialed his number just to hear him. He picked up after a long pause, his tone rushed. "Hey, yeah, hi. How are you, beta?" I asked softly, trying to not sound needy. "Good, good. Just about to have dinner." "Oh, with her family?" "Yeah, they came over. Listen, can I call you later, Mom?" He didn't call back that night. I sat by the window holding my phone like it was a living thing that could bring him back if I just waited long enough. The house was too quiet. Even the ticking clock sounded louder than usual. I whispered to myself, "He's busy. He'll call tomorrow." But tomorrow came and went, and then another. The day I realized something had truly shifted was on his first wedding anniversary. I had spent the entire morning preparing his favorite dishes. Chicken korma, rice pudding, the kind he used to sneak bites off when it was still warm. I packed everything neatly, tied the boxes with a ribbon, and asked my husband to drive me to their place. When we reached, my heart raced like I was meeting him after years. I rang the bell, and it was his wife who opened the door. She looked surprised, though she smiled politely. "Oh, Auntie, you came." "Yes, beta," I said, handing her the boxes. "I made some food for you both." "Oh, that's so sweet," she replied, glancing over her shoulder. "Come in." The living room was neat and modern, a little too quiet. My son came out a moment later, his phone still in his hand. "Oh, Mom, you're here." "Yes," I smiled, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "I thought I'd bring you some food." He looked at his wife, then back at me. "You shouldn't have gone through the trouble." That line, "you shouldn't have gone through the trouble," cut through me in ways I can't describe. He used to light up whenever I cooked for him. He'd hug me and say, "Mom, no one makes it like you do." But that day he said it like a formality, like a man checking off politeness from a list. We sat together for a few minutes, talking about small things. The conversation was stiff, filled with awkward pauses. His wife smiled every now and then, but she was busy setting the table, arranging dishes. I noticed how he called her baby, and she called him love. I watched their laughter bounce off the walls, and even though I tried to smile, something inside me felt smaller and smaller. When I got up to leave, I hugged him tightly. He hugged back, lightly, distractedly. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said. Then before I even reached the door, his wife asked, "Honey, could you help me with the candles?" And that was it.
He turned away before I even stepped out. In the car, I stayed quiet. My husband asked, "What's wrong?" And I just shook my head. "Nothing," I said. But my hands wouldn't stop trembling. That night, I scrolled through old pictures, his baby pictures, his graduation, the selfies he sent me from his first job. In every one, I could see the boy who once couldn't fall asleep without saying goodnight, Mom. And I whispered to the silence, "Where did you go, my son?" Weeks turned into months. The distance grew like an invisible wall between us. I started calling less, partly out of pride, partly because I didn't want to be a burden. Every mother knows that feeling. When love turns into something, you must ration carefully so it doesn't drive them away. One day I got a call. My heart leapt when I saw his name on the screen. I answered quickly, smiling. "Hello, my son?" He hesitated before speaking. Mom, can you talk later? We're kind of in the middle of something." "Oh, sure," I replied softly. There was a pause. Then he said, "Actually, can I ask you something?" "Yes, beta." "When you talk to her, could you not call her beta? It makes her a little uncomfortable." I froze. My breath caught in my chest. "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. I know, Mom. It's different now, you know?" Different now. After that call, I went to my room, closed the door, and cried like I hadn't cried in years. I didn't even know what hurt more, that my son was drifting away, or that I was being asked to stop loving like a mother does.
The days after that conversation felt heavy, like someone had dimmed the light inside my heart. I moved through the house as if each room carried echoes of his laughter, the sound of his footsteps, the way he used to call out "Mom" from the kitchen, asking where his socks were or if dinner was ready. It's strange how silence can scream louder than any voice. I tried to tell myself not to take it personally, that maybe every son changes after marriage, that perhaps I was overthinking. But the truth is, a mother feels when something precious is slipping away. It's like trying to hold sand in your hands. No matter how tightly you close your fingers, it keeps falling through. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I found one of his old shirts tucked at the back of a drawer. It still smelled faintly of him, that mix of detergent and something uniquely his. I sat on the bed holding it, pressing it against my face, and I whispered, "You used to call me Mom. Just once more, say it." The air answered with silence. A few weeks later, I decided to visit him again, unannounced this time. I baked the cake, his favorite chocolate fudge, and told myself it would be a surprise. I wore my best shawl, the one he gifted me 2 birthdays ago, and smiled at my reflection, trying to believe I still had a place in his world. When I arrived at their house, his wife opened the door again. She looked surprised, though not exactly pleased. "Oh, Auntie, you didn't tell us you were coming." "I wanted to surprise you both," I said with a warm smile, holding up the cake box. "I baked his favorite." She hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. "Sure, come in." The living room was spotless, as always. I noticed small changes, new curtains, different pictures on the wall, none of which included me or our old family portraits. My heart clenched a little, but I said nothing. My son came out of the study a few minutes later, his phone in one hand. "Mom?" he said, surprised. "I brought you cake," I said cheerfully, as if nothing had changed. "I thought we could have tea together." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile you give to a neighbor. "Oh, that's nice. Thanks, Mom. We were just about to head out, though. Dinner plans." "Oh," I said softly, lowering my eyes. "Then maybe just a few minutes." He looked at his wife, who shrugged gently. "We can sit for a bit," she said, not unkindly. We had tea, but it felt like 3 strangers sitting around a table. Every time I tried to ask something personal about his work, his health, his life, he gave short answers.
His wife filled most of the silence, talking about their new house plans, their trips, their friends. I nodded and smiled, even though none of it included me. When I was about to leave, I took his hand and said, "You've built a beautiful life, Betha. I'm proud of you." He squeezed my hand briefly. "Thanks, Mom." It was the pause before the word mom that tore something inside me, like he had to remember what I was to him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window looking at the moon. It reminded me of when he was a boy, afraid of the dark, asking me to sit beside his bed and tell him stories. I remember his little voice saying, "Mom, don't go." And now all I wanted was for him to call, to say "Mom" again without hesitation. The next few months, I heard less and less from him. His messages became rare. A good morning on my birthday, a forwarded video on WhatsApp, a photo from a vacation. I responded to every single one, pretending the connection was still there, even if it was only through small pixels on a screen. Then one day, my husband fell ill. It wasn't sudden. His health had been fragile for a while, but that day, his condition worsened. I called my son immediately, my hands shaking. He didn't answer. I called again and again. Finally, after 6 tries, he picked up. "Mom, I'm in a meeting. Can we talk later?" "Your father is very sick," I said, my voice trembling. "Please, can you come home?" He sighed softly. "Mom, we have a client presentation. Maybe tomorrow?" Tomorrow. That word again. The one that never comes when you need it most. That night, my husband's condition deteriorated further. The doctor said it was serious. I sat by his bedside, holding his hand, praying my son would walk through the door. Every sound outside made me look up with hope. The sound of a car, footsteps, a door creak, but he didn't come. By morning, my husband was gone. I called my son again, my voice breaking. "He's gone," I said simply. There was silence on the line, then a choked whisper. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm coming." He arrived later that day, looking devastated. When he hugged me, I cried into his chest, feeling both comfort and distance at once. He kept saying, "I'm sorry, Mom," over and over, but in my heart, a small voice whispered, "You weren't here when he needed you most." The funeral passed in a blur. People came and went, offering condolences. My son stayed for 2 days, then said he had to go back. "Work is piling up," he said. I nodded. I understand. After he left, the house felt emptier than ever. I was alone now, truly alone. I would sometimes replay his old voice messages just to hear him say "Mom." But one day, when I scrolled through them, I realized most of them were gone, automatically deleted by the app. My heart sank. It was as if time itself was erasing my place in his life. Months passed. The seasons changed. I found comfort in routine. Morning tea, watering the plants, reading the newspaper, even when I couldn't focus. I tried to visit him a few times, but there was always a reason. "We're out of town. We're busy. Maybe next week." One evening, I saw a photo of him and his wife on social media, smiling, carefree, holding hands on a beach somewhere. The caption read, "Family time." Family. I stared at that word for a long time. My throat tightened and tears blurred the screen. I wasn't angry. I wasn't jealous. I was just invisible. A few days later, I got a message from him. It wasn't a call, just a text. "Hey ma'am, can you send my old documents if you have them? Need them for work." Ma'am, not mom. Not even mom by mistake. I read that message again and again, my vision blurring. My hands trembled as I typed back slowly. Yes, I'll find them. I didn't ask why he called me that. I didn't remind him who I was. I just sat there feeling like a name that had been replaced. When I went to his old room to look for the papers, I found his childhood diary. Inside, written in his little boy handwriting, were the words, "My mom is my best friend. I will never stop loving her." I pressed that page to my heart and whispered, "You already have."
After that message, something in me quietly broke. I didn't tell anyone, not even my sister when she called to check in. I said I was fine, that I was keeping busy, that I was happy my son had a good life. But deep inside, it felt as though I'd lost him twice. Once when he moved out, and again when he stopped calling me mom. The word ma'am echoed in my mind for days. Every time I thought of it, my chest tightened. I tried to convince myself it was a typo, that maybe he hadn't meant it literally, but my heart knew better. Words carry the weight of truth when people stop trying to hide it. I found his documents and mailed them to him, neatly arranged and labeled, just as I used to pack his school bag when he was little. I didn't include a note. I didn't know what to say anymore. Days passed without a reply. No thank you, no message to confirm he had received them. I checked my phone more often than I should have, waiting for that familiar notification tone that never came. Eventually, I stopped waiting. I began to keep myself busy with small things, watering the plants, rearranging old photo albums, cooking new recipes even though I ate alone. There's a strange kind of comfort in routine when you're trying not to fall apart. Sometimes, late at night, I would walk into his old room. I'd sit on his bed, run my hand over the sheets, and remember the nights he used to fall asleep while talking to me about his dreams. He wanted to travel the world, to buy me a big house, to make me proud. I smiled at those memories, even though they made my eyes sting with tears. One afternoon, while I was dusting the shelves, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. My heart jumped, hoping it was him calling from a new phone. "Hello," I answered quickly. "Hello, is this Mrs. Ahmed?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes." "I'm calling from the hospital. Your son had a minor accident. Nothing serious, but he's asked us to inform you." My heart dropped. "Which hospital? I'll come right away." When I reached there, my legs were trembling so badly I could hardly walk. I found him in a hospital bed, a small bandage on his forehead. His wife was sitting beside him, scrolling through her phone. "Mom," he said softly when he saw me. It was the first time in months he'd called me that. The word hit me like sunlight after a long winter. I rushed to his side, holding his hand. "Are you okay, beta?" I asked, tears filling my eyes. "He's fine, Mom. Just a small accident. Thank God." I stroked his hair like I used to when he was little. He smiled faintly, and for a brief moment, it felt like the years had melted away, like my boy was back. His wife looked up and said, "He just needs rest, nothing serious." "Yes, of course," I nodded. "Would you like me to stay with you tonight?" She hesitated, glancing at him. He looked uncomfortable. "That's okay, Mom. She'll be here. You should go rest." I nodded again, forcing a smile. "All right, beta. But promise me you'll call once you're discharged?" "I will, Mom." And those two words, "I will," became a tiny flame of hope in my heart. When I reached home that evening, I couldn't stop smiling. I went straight to the prayer mat and thanked God. Maybe this was the moment things would change. Maybe he'd realized how much I still cared. But days passed, and he didn't call, not even a message. When I finally gathered the courage to text him, "How are you feeling, better?" he replied hours later with just 2 words, "All good." That was it. No mom, no warmth, just the polite distance. My heart sank again. I felt foolish for hoping. After that, I stopped reaching out. I thought maybe if I gave him space, he would come back on his own. I told myself, don't call, don't message,
Let him remember me on his own. But the days turned into weeks, and the silence became unbearable. I started talking to his photos like he could hear me. I would sit by the window and whisper things I wanted to say to him, stories about my day, memories, how lonely the house felt without him. I knew it was foolish, but it made the emptiness a little easier to bear. One evening, while scrolling through my phone, I saw a post from him again, a picture of him and his wife smiling in front of their new house. The caption read, "New beginnings with my love." No mention of family, no tag for his parents, nothing. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. It wasn't jealousy, it was realization. The little boy who once couldn't sleep without hearing my voice was gone. He had built a new life, and I wasn't a part of it. A week later, I received an invitation in the mail, a baby shower. His wife was expecting, my first grandchild. My hands shook as I read the card. My heart filled with joy and pain all at once. I called him immediately. "Congratulations, beta," I said, my voice trembling with happiness. "Thanks, Mom," he replied briefly. "We were going to tell you soon." "I'd love to help. I can come early, help decorate, cook." He interrupted, gently but firmly. "It's okay, Mom. Her friends are handling everything." "Oh, I see." I tried to sound cheerful. "Then I'll just bring something for the baby." "That's sweet," he said, and then added, "And Mom, could you please not tell anyone about the baby yet? We're keeping it private for now." I understood what he meant. He didn't want me to post or talk about it. Still, it hurt to be told that I had to hide my joy. When the day of the baby shower came, I dressed carefully, picking a soft pastel scarf, the one he'd once said looked nice on me. I arrived early, holding a small box wrapped with gold paper. Inside was a silver bracelet for the baby, engraved with the words, "For my grandchild, with love from Grandma." The house was full of laughter, balloons, and music. His wife looked radiant. My son looked happy. But as I stood there, surrounded by people I barely knew, I felt like a guest, not family. When it was time for photos, everyone gathered around the couple. I stood off to the side, waiting for my turn. But it never came. They took photos with friends, cousins, colleagues, but no one called me. Later that night, as I sat alone in my room, I looked at the bracelet I had brought. It hadn't even been opened. I placed it carefully in a small box inside my cupboard and whispered, "Maybe when the baby grows up, they'll call me Grandma, even if you don't call me Mom." The night stretched long and quiet. I lay awake thinking about how love can fade, not with anger, but with silence. My heart felt heavy, but I still couldn't hate him. I didn't even want to. I just wanted to understand what I had done wrong. Had I loved too much, expected too much, or was I simply a reminder of a life he had outgrown?
The day my grandchild was born was one of those days when the sky looked too perfect to match what I was feeling inside. Anxious, excited, trembling with hope. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I packed a small overnight bag. I didn't even wait for a call. I just knew. A mother always knows when her child is about to become a father. I reached the hospital early in the morning. The scent of antiseptic mixed with the soft hum of machines filled the corridors. I spotted him standing outside the maternity ward, pacing nervously. For a moment he looked just like the boy who used to wait outside his classroom after an exam, biting his nails, anxious, hoping for good news. When he saw me, he froze. "Mom, you're here?" I couldn't stay home, I said softly. "I wanted to see my grandchild." He hesitated, then nodded. "She's in labor. It might take a while." "That's okay. I'll wait." We sat side by side in silence. I wanted to reach for his hand, but I didn't. He kept checking his phone, scrolling through messages. I wanted to ask him if he was scared, if he was excited, if he remembered the day he was born, how small and fragile he had been in my arms. But I didn't ask any of that. I just sat there, breathing the same air,
grateful for even this quiet closeness. Hours passed, and finally the doctor came out with a smile. Congratulations, it's a boy. My heart leapt. A grandson, my grandson. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, God." I stood up immediately. "Can I see them?" The doctor smiled. "Only the husband for now. The mother needs rest." So I waited again. Minutes felt like hours. I imagined what he might look like. Maybe he'd have my son's eyes or that same stubborn chin. I wanted to hold him, to kiss his tiny forehead, to whisper the same lullabies I once sang to his father. But after what felt like forever, my son came out, his face glowing with pride. He showed me a small photo on his phone, a tiny baby wrapped in a blue blanket. My eyes filled with tears. "Oh, he's beautiful," I whispered. "He looks just like you when you were born." He smiled softly and then said, "Thanks, Mom." I reached out instinctively, touching his arm. "Can I see him?" "Not right now," he said quickly. "She's still resting and they're limiting visitors." "I understand," I said, swallowing my disappointment. "I'll wait." I waited all day. I didn't leave, not even for lunch. But when evening came, he told me gently, "Mom, you should go home. We'll be discharged in 2 days. You can visit then." "All right, beta. Take care of her and the baby." "I will," he said, hugging me briefly before walking back inside. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the photo he'd shown me until my phone battery died. I whispered to myself, "He called me Mom again. Maybe things will be better now." When they came home 2 days later, I went to visit them carrying gifts and food. I had knit a small blue sweater the same way I used to knit for my son when he was a baby. I could hardly contain my excitement. But when I entered their house, something in the air felt distant. The baby was sleeping in a crib beside the couch. My son's wife was resting, looking tired but content. My son smiled politely and said, "Mom, meet Arav." Arav, my grandson. I leaned over the crib, my heart melting. "He's perfect," I whispered. I wanted to hold him, but I didn't ask. I waited for them to offer. They didn't. Instead, his wife said softly, "He just fell asleep. Maybe later." "Of course," I said quickly. "Let him rest." We had tea together. The conversation was light, careful, as if I were a guest again. Every time I mentioned something about parenting or how I raised my son, she smiled politely and changed the subject. I told myself she didn't mean to be rude. She was just new, protective, still adjusting. When I finally stood to leave, my son walked me to the door. "Mom, thanks for coming." "I'll come again tomorrow," I said, smiling. "Maybe I can help with the baby?" He hesitated. "We actually hired a nurse. She's been helping a lot. You don't need to worry." "Oh," I said softly. "I just wanted to spend time with you all." "Of course, we'll call you soon." But soon never came. Weeks passed and I wasn't invited again. I sent messages asking about the baby. "How's Arav? Is he eating well? Does he sleep through the night?" But most went unanswered, or I'd get short replies like, "All good, Mom." I tried not to intrude. I tried to understand that new parents needed space. But sometimes when I sat in my quiet house, I could almost hear the faint cry of a baby in my head, the one I longed to hold. Then one day out of nowhere, my son called. "Mom, we're having Arav's naming ceremony next week. Can you come?" My heart leapt. Of course, beta, I wouldn't miss it. That entire week I prepared gifts, cooked sweets, and even bought a new sari. I wanted to look my best for the day. Not for the guests, but for my grandson. The ceremony was beautiful. Their home was filled with relatives, laughter, flowers, and music. I watched as my son held the baby in his arms, his eyes soft with love. For a moment I felt proud. Proud that I had raised a man capable of such tenderness. When the priest asked who would whisper the baby's name into his ear, my heart raced. In our family, that honor traditionally went to the grandmother, but my son looked at his wife's mother-in-law instead. "Auntie, would you like to do it?" She smiled and stepped forward. I felt the room blur for a second. I lowered my gaze, pretending to adjust my shawl. No one noticed the tear that rolled down my cheek. After the ceremony, I tried to hold Arav. "Just for a moment," I said softly. His wife hesitated, then reluctantly handed him to me. He was warm, tiny, perfect. I held him close and whispered, "You don't know me yet, little one, but I love you more than words can say." He stirred slightly in my arms, making a soft cooing sound. I smiled through tears. For that single moment, everything, the pain, the distance, the silence, disappeared. Then his wife's voice broke the spell. "He needs to be fed," she said, reaching for him. I handed him back carefully, nodding. My hands felt suddenly empty, like they'd lost the reason they existed. When I got home that night, I placed my hands over my heart, feeling it beat painfully slow. I told myself that love sometimes has to survive in silence, that maybe being a mother meant loving even when you're no longer needed. But still a question haunted me. How did mom become ma'am? How did a home full of laughter become so quiet? A month later, I got another message from him. Short, polite, distant again. "Mom, can you send some old baby photos of me? We're making a collage for Arav's first month celebration." I spent the entire night going through albums, scanning pictures, smiling and crying at once. I sent them all with a note that said, "He looks just like you did when you were small." He never replied. A week later, I saw the collage online, full of his childhood pictures of me holding him, feeding him, bathing him, and yet in the caption he'd written, "Arav's journey begins. Thank you to everyone who made this moment special." Everyone, not even a mention of me. That night I closed my phone, sat in the dark and whispered to myself, maybe this is how mothers disappear, not in death, but in memories that no longer belong to them. Still, every morning I woke up and prayed for his happiness, because even if he had forgotten, I hadn't. Even if he didn't call me mom anymore, I would always call him my son.
When I woke up the next morning, the house was so silent that even the ticking clock sounded like a heartbeat. I looked around and saw the empty teacup on the table, the folded blanket on the couch, and the shoes lined neatly by the door. Everything was in its place, yet nothing felt right. It was like the air had changed, like it no longer belonged to me. I made my morning tea and sat by the window, waiting for the sound of the doorbell that never came. I told myself, maybe he would call today. Maybe he would remember that I loved hearing his voice in the morning. But the phone stayed still, quiet, lifeless, like it too had forgotten my son's laughter. Days turned into weeks, and I started living around memories instead of people. I would find myself standing by his old room, touching the doorknob, but never opening it. I was afraid that if I opened it, the sense of him would be gone, and that would mean the last piece of him had finally left me. Sometimes I'd cook his favorite meal and set an extra plate on the table, even though I knew no one would sit there. I'd take the first bite and smile through the ache, whispering, "It's your favorite, my boy," just to fill the silence. One evening, I decided to visit him. I hadn't seen him in months. I called first, and it took him a few seconds to recognize my voice. That small hesitation pierced me deeper than any knife could. He sounded polite, too polite, like he was talking to a stranger. He said, "Of course, Mom, come by." But there was something missing. The warmth, the excitement, the tone he once had when he used to say, "Mom, you're coming? Great." I cooked the whole night before going. I made biryani, his favorite dessert, and even ironed the dress he once said made me look elegant. When I reached his home, his wife opened the door.
She smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that welcomes you. It was the kind that holds distance politely. She called him, and he came out of the living room, phone still in hand. His eyes met mine for a moment, and he smiled, softly, carefully, but the word never came out. He didn't say Mom. He said, "Oh, you're here." Just that. I froze, standing there with the basket of food in my hands. I waited for him to add something, Mom, Mama, anything, but it never came. I felt the world shrink. That one missing word was heavier than everything else I carried in my heart. His wife said, "Come in," and I nodded, stepping inside a home that used to feel like mine, but now I was only a guest. We sat together, talking about small things, the weather, his work, their plans, but every sentence felt rehearsed. My mind was screaming questions I couldn't ask. When did you stop needing me? When did I become someone you had to be polite to? When did Mom turn into you? When I served the food, his wife smiled again and said, "Oh, you didn't have to go through all this trouble." I said, "It's not trouble. I love cooking for my son." But even as I said it, I realized he hadn't looked at me the way he used to. He wasn't my little boy anymore. He was someone's husband, someone else's world now. When it was time to leave, I hugged him, and he hugged me back. But it felt different. His arms were there, but his heart was elsewhere. I wanted to say so much, to tell him that I missed the sound of him saying Mom, that I missed being needed. But I didn't. I just whispered, "Take care," and turned away before he could see the tears forming in my eyes. The ride home was quiet. I looked out the window, watching the city lights blur through my tears. I remembered all the nights I stayed awake when he had a fever, all the mornings I made his breakfast before school, all the times he called me his hero. I had given everything to raise him, and now I was learning what it meant to let go, even when your heart isn't ready. When I reached home, I placed the leftover food on the table. The smell filled the air, reminding me of his laughter, his mess, his warmth. I sat there for hours, not moving, not thinking, just breathing through the ache. My hands were trembling, and for the first time, I whispered to myself, maybe love isn't about being called Mom. Maybe it's about knowing he's okay, even if he forgets who kept him safe. But deep down, I couldn't convince myself completely. The word Mom isn't just a title. It's a heartbeat, a bond, a promise. When he stopped saying it, it felt like part of me stopped existing. Weeks later, I got a message from him. "We're expecting a baby." I read that line again and again. My heart fluttered and broke at the same time. I typed, "I'm so happy for you both." But what I really wanted to say was, maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to love someone so deeply that every word they say becomes your whole world. When their baby was born, I visited the hospital. I held the tiny life in my arms and felt something new. The baby opened his little eyes, and for a second, I saw my son's face in his. My tears fell without permission. I whispered, "Welcome, my love." His wife smiled faintly, and my son looked at me with something like guilt in his eyes. He said softly, "Thank you." Not thanks, Mom. Just thank you. I smiled, even though it hurt. I handed the baby back and walked out of the room, knowing something had shifted forever. That day, I realized motherhood doesn't end when your child grows up. It just changes shape. Sometimes it becomes invisible, sometimes it becomes quiet, but it never stops existing. That night, when I got home, I sat in the dark and thought about everything. My son had a new family now. He had his own responsibilities, his own life. Maybe that's how it's meant to be. Maybe every mother has to lose a piece of herself to give her child a complete world. But still, When I close my eyes at night, I can hear the echo of his little voice calling, "Mom, look at me." And I open my eyes, reaching out to a silence that doesn't answer back. Maybe one day he'll call me again. Not out of habit or politeness, but from the same love that once filled our home. And until that day, I'll keep whispering into the quiet, hoping the wind carries my voice to him. I'm still here, my son. Even if you don't call me mom anymore, you will always be my boy. And maybe, just maybe, one day he'll remember that love doesn't fade with silence. It only waits to be spoken again.